Friends, we've brought the heat. This episode, we sat down with Paul Vigil, and oh my goodness gracious, we talk about magic in the real world, in places like psychedelics, in places like religion, in places like our history, in everywhere, as well as how to be an amazing performer. So if that interests you, well, you're already here, so keep listening and you are really going to love it. Speaking of religion, thank you all for being part of the religion that is Discourse in Magic, being a Discourse in Magic-ian or whatever, the Discourse Army. I don't know what you guys call yourself, but we do still have a few t-shirts available. So if you want to be one of the lucky 100 people that gets your hand on a Discourse in Magic t-shirt before they are all gone, now is the chance. Help support the podcast. We want you to continue to get these episodes for free. And one way to do that is to give us a little bit of money, and you get bragging rights for life to have a Discourse in Magic t-shirt. So thank you so much. Head to the website, grab a shirt, but barring that, whether you buy it, whether you don't, I still love you, and you're still gonna love this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a very special guest, a very highly regarded magician. He's been on Penn and Teller Fool Us twice, once that you've seen and once that was before the scenes to make sure that the show was legit. He's a regular Vegas performer, and I'm very lucky to have been able to spend some time with him recently when he was in Toronto, and so excited to dive into his theory. We're here with Paul Vigil. Paul, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on. How are you two?
We're doing really good.
Very excited to be talking to you.
Absolutely. And this is the tail end of a great week of interviews. So we're really happy to
sending it off with a bang. Very excited.
So.
Oh, nice. Who else has been on, if I can ask?
Oh, man, we've had a ton of people. We had
today, Adam Wilbur, Jared Koff.
Jared Koff. We did a few days ago.
Oh, he's my favorite.
We did Lloyd Barnes, Mario Lopez, Michael Close. So we got some good ones in this week.
I love it.
So let's start at the very beginning for you. How did you find magic? How did you catch the bug?
The first time that really I saw magic, and it was on a family vacation. I went to Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco when I was about maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I still specifically remember the first 3 effects that I witnessed that day, which were sponge balls, the ball and tube, and the Chinese linking rings. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a magic shop that was there on Fisherman's Wharf next to Ripley's Believe It or Not Wax Museum. And I'm sure people that are in that area are familiar with it. I don't know if it's still even there or not. It's been so many years ago. And anyways, we went there to the magic shop. And of course, my parents said, get whatever you want. And I got 3 things. And I'm sure you can guess at what they were.
Right, of course. And that's a very sort of classic story. It's like you see something specific, you want to know the secret, and then you go and you find it. So it was a street
performer, specifically that was there. And then also the proximity to that magic shop and being able to get
that gratification right away.
A week or a month or a year later that I finally had a chance to dive into that. It was literally, I turned around and I had a chance to grab onto that stuff.
That's amazing.
And I think where most kids, whatever age they get into it, there's a period and then they get out of it. And I just have never gotten out of it. And even whatever, there's only really been a few interests that I've had in my life, and magic is probably always the thread that keeps them together.
That's awesome. And I think so many people can relate to that story. Paint us a little bit of a picture from how you went from there to being, a master magician performing in Vegas and doing what you're doing.
I don't know about that, but the big influences on me as a kid were going to the library and looking for magic and finding greater magic there in the public library.
Right.
And I think where a lot of people around my age and even younger, they talk about finding Erdnase, or even my teacher, Johnny Thompson, tells this story of when he was a kid, and it expands your vocabulary so much because you're like, even these words like in jog and out jog, what are they? What do they mean? And you got to find out all this stuff. And while greater magic wasn't as Edwardian in its tone as Erdnase, there was still just a great vocabulary that was in there, and it really made me think of magic as being grand and not on par with clowns. I mean, when you read that preface to Greater Magic, it's one of the greatest pieces of poetry penned about our art.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. And I wasn't aware that you studied under Johnny Thompson. That is,
Well, I moved here to Las Vegas, must have been about 15, 16 or 17 years ago now. And he was one of the first people that I met here. And literally within 3 minutes of meeting each other, we were fast friends. And he doesn't live too far down the street from me. And ever since then, I probably spend 3 or 4 or 5 days a week with him.
That's
wow,
awesome.
That's amazing.
And a good opportunity. You've worked with some incredible magicians, particularly Johnny Thompson. I'd love to know sort of what has that influence been on you, and how has your magic changed?
Well, John's had a real huge influence on me in the fact that as I started out in magic, of course, we all learn other people's material, and that's our bedrock and what we go from. But in my early 20s, I was really interested in only performing things that I put together. And then, I'm around 29 or 30 and I meet Johnny, and he just installed in me this sense of really returning to the classics of magic, things like the egg bag, the chop cup, the cups and balls. Like I wasn't so much interested in doing those things anymore. And John would always push me and say, go out and try it in front of your audience and tell me what you think. And then oftentimes what many of these effects are is, I assume that I had lost my love for him, but then I see the way the audience reacts. And some of the effects in your show, I think you have to let the audience decide.
Right.
And another one that I would bring up for me in this regard is Professor's Nightmare,
right?
Which I love to perform in my show. And, while many magicians may think, oh, it's such standard material or whatnot. I mean, even bringing the sponge balls back up again, 99.9% of the people you perform for have never even seen the sponge balls, let alone Professor's Nightmare.
Right. Yeah, there's something to be said.
At least that's most of my audience where, again, when I was younger, though, it was mostly hanging out with magicians. So you want something new, you want something fresh, you want to show your friends something that they've never seen before.
Yeah, and it's also kind of this sort of for yourself, you want something new and something fresh when you're first starting out. You're more interested in what you get out of performing than what you're giving to your audience.
And
right?
Something else that I've learned, I think, over time that's really, it bites me and then it wanes off from me, but it always comes back stronger and stronger, is sometimes you start to get a little bored of the material that you're doing. But when you look at the people that were the best, that's all they did was those things. And I think oftentimes it's something that Ross Johnson told to me. So I can't take credit for it, but it resonates very well with me. And it was something he said actually in response to Michael Weber. And it was, when you start to get bored of your material, that's when you're really starting to learn it.
Yeah.
I love that because, it's not that you want to get bored of it, but you want to get so used to it that it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
It becomes like walking.
Well, and
or running.
I can tell you that I had a mistake just, a couple of weeks ago at the sessions in London. I had 3 shows there, and, just going over there, you don't sleep for very long. And then you get there and everybody's there. So the party starts and blah, 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 blah. And then I had 3 shows to do. And, I went into the room there a couple of hours early to set my briefcase up and get everything ready in my pockets and whatnot and feel the room out. And then Johnny shows up, and then Shane Cobalt shows up, and I'm practicing for a little bit. And then, the seats are there all lined up, and Johnny stretches out on some chairs, and then Shane stretches out on some chairs. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to stretch out on some chairs too. I ended up falling asleep before my show. We all actually fell asleep, and all of a sudden there's knocking on the door, and I open it up, and there's like 300 people there. The show's about to start in 5 minutes. Are you ready? And then here's what comes. It's been eating at me, and it's just always these mistakes. I don't know how they hit other people, but I'm always, one of the things that I like to hold into for myself is, I may mess up when I'm practicing, but usually when it comes down to performing in front of people, I never, ever, ever mess up. And I always think that's why I'm practicing so hard. That's why I'm practicing for so long. Well, here I am at this show again that I've just taken a half-hour nap after being awake for 2 days, and I'm about in there, I'm checking everything's good to go. I start with the chopped cup, and I literally get 1 minute into it, and I forget where I'm going.
Oh,
I just completely
freeze up, just
and
blank.
I had to look up at the audience and say, I just had a complete brain fart and forgot where I was at in this routine. And I thought about it for about 7 or 10 seconds. And then I was like, oh yeah, now I remember where I'm at.
Oh, man.
Still, oh my God, it's been eating at me.
Yeah.
I looked out in the audience and there's so many of my peers out there, and it's like the last time that you want to mess up. But, what do you do?
Yeah, performing for magicians is both like, it's the most comforting and scary audience at the same time, because you're like, you odds are you're not going to fool them. But then again, if you screw up, it really feels bad because they know how bad you screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? With a lay audience, you can recover and be like, it was part of the show. But
that's just it. It's all of a sudden, I'm just like, where am I? And then, the rest of everything went just smooth once I got my rhythm going.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, the rubber was not meeting the road there for a moment.
For sure. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, about the classic, not your mistake, a little bit more about the classics in magic. I love the idea that people don't, like laymen have not seen it.
Oh, so maybe this is something that I should say is I got a little bit sidetracked there with talking about John is how many people have the opportunity to learn this stuff, So like I get to learn Vernon from One Step Removed, and Charlie Miller and Harry Reiser,
right.
And these are, of course, men that I only was able to read about as a young man, even though I've been into magic since I was a kid. It wasn't until I was really 15 that I even found out there was such a thing as magic lectures, which completely blew my mind when I found that out.
Right.
Yeah. I remember my first magic lecture. It was such a surreal experience. It's just a whole new way to take in that kind of
right.
It's not
my first magic lecture was Aldo Colombini, and he was such a warm and generous and creative soul. I mean, he wouldn't know who I was from anybody else, but he was the first person I saw when I was a kid, and I'll never forget the time that I spent with him. And in fact, in my show to this day, and from that point forward, there's a piece of magic that he taught in that lecture that I've still performed.
Wow.
So is a lot of the magic that you perform, I mean, I first of all, I love the idea that certain things you perform because, it's an opportunity to learn it one step removed and then do it, directly from those people. But a lot of the magic that you do in your show is the choices that you do them sort of because of how coming into that trick or that effect arrived in your life, or is it mostly because you choose it because of the way that you want like the audience to feel? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is it for you or is it for them?
I think it's both, because I mean, again, all the magic in the show is stuff that I love to perform, but I'm trying to, theatrically, if I'm doing, really what I like to do is about an hour-long show, which is about half of classical magic and then ending with the mentalism. And, but I want to keep the ramp going up the whole time. So I'm not going to do the closer in the middle.
Right.
Right. And I think, that is a balancing act that you have to find over time. And the part of the model that I use, it's not from me. I shamelessly stole it from Jimmy Grippo, is this idea of starting with the magic and then ending with the mentalism. And, if you want to talk specifically about some of the way the tricks are chosen in the show, we could talk about in the beginning, I really like the chop cup if people are very close, and cups and balls if they're just a little bit further away.
Right.
Okay.
And the reason that I like this effect in the beginning, I mean, it's been a choice of others. I mean, specifically Vernon opened with the cups and balls, right? But I think as a magician, when you're coming out in front of a lay audience, the effect that you can do the quickest to show that you really are here to do what you say you're going to do is a production. And so that's why with those two effects, I really want to get to the productions as fast as I can.
Right.
Right. And then it's like, ta-da. And it's like, man, he really is good. Especially, I don't know if you've seen me perform or not before, Tyler. And I know Jonah has recently. And a lot of people always say, don't challenge your audience, but a lot of my magic is challenging my audience and
I watched you
telling
do
them,
that.
like,
I
I know
love it.
that you've seen magic on TV and you've thought to yourself, oh, if I was there, I'd know exactly what this character was up to. But you're here with me now. So if you want to be on the side of me, if you want to be behind me, if you're not comfortable where you're at, I don't want you to walk away later and not be satisfied.
That's amazing. It's almost like it's not.
Another thing with that though is just doing magic for so long that I know I can switch technique halfway through if I start to feel the heat coming from one direction.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not so much a challenge to be like, I'm better than you. It's more so that they can feel like they had enough control that the magic
right. Like at any time I want them to feel that at any time they could examine the coins or the cards. Now, again, it has to be a very judicious use of these kind of phrasings and these kind of invitations for your audience to basically come behind the curtain. So as an example, I may, kind of a callback line for me for many years has been, can I be any more fair?
Right.
Because if I can, you let me know.
Right.
Right. And so I'll ask those kind of things before the thread is hooked up and after the thread is hooked up, but not while the thread is hooked up.
Right. Because you don't want to, you don't want an interruption, but you want opportunity for them to take it in.
Well, it's at telling those things at the point where you can't get busted.
Right.
I'm not going to be at the dirtiest point in the routine and now ask,
should I move?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like those kind of things. I want people to walk away and just be, I don't know. I mean, I went to the side. I couldn't, I don't know.
So on that note, I want to sort of ask what your goal is in terms of performing magic. What is it in an ideal world that your audience walks away from a show saying or thinking? Is it that it was real, that it was not real, that you have
I'm doing it as if it's real. And I think it's very pretentious for any magicians to believe that they change people's belief systems in one way or the other. Now, I don't try to change people's belief system in one way or the other. And even when I start the mentalism, I say things like, some people call this nonverbal communication. Other people say it's intuition. If you ask me, I believe it's probably a phenomenon that prefers not to be named.
Right.
And I just want people to define that on their own. And I find... actually, I found Darren Brown much more interesting in his early career when he wasn't saying what he was doing so much as the later career, because it was more of a point for my imagination to play with those kind of effects, right?
Right.
You see more in what you don't see than what you do see.
Yeah, well, I rarely do any visual magic, and I usually find that the visual magic, well, there's a trend toward it right now, and to make things more visual, I find that it actually ends up lacking in mystery, because it's like right when things are behind that curtain for a second or behind your hand, and then things change or move or, then it's... My imagination has a point of contention there with a moment where everything was out in the open and I just saw it, Like for instance, if you just set something down in your periphery, say you're reading or having a drink and you just set it down off to your left and you turn to your book on your right and you turn back and it's gone. Right? It's much more mysterious than if you were looking right at it and it vanished right in front of you. To me, anyway, that's the way I look at these things. I'm sure they're subjective.
Yeah. See, like the way I think of it is kind of like, I don't want to say the too perfect theory, but it's similar to that. It's like you're watching real life CGI, which is quite cool, but in your mind, that it's an illusion.
Right. Like most of those things when I've had, I'm like, one specific thing I can think of is one time I stayed awake for quite a few days. And it was when I was traveling and I went to London and Finland and back, and I ended up, and I've read of this phenomenon, and it's like one of the most general phenomena of people that are under sleep deprivation, and you can look this phenomena up online. It's called sleepwalkers. And I got back to my house after being up for a couple of days, and like I literally saw like ghost figures that were walking in front of me, but as I would blink my eyes, they would disappear. So
that's frightening.
I knew that those were figments of my imagination, right?
I actually really struggled with that my whole life. I don't talk about it a lot, but my parents had me tested for schizophrenia multiple times because I would see things, particularly at night, but I would see figures and people and try to talk to them when I was a kid. But it turns out that I just wasn't getting proper REM sleep, and my dream state and awake state were sort of overlapping for a moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I had not had that phenomenon myself, it would be very, very foreign, or it would be a hard swallow for me to have if I didn't taste of that myself, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's sort of like knowing that you're, taking a drug. You often have that. It's just a drug, and like, and you don't
Most people lived through this.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, like, this is not permanent. This is not permanent.
And exactly. But I'm done, and then never again. But with magic, particularly magic that takes place in the mind, you don't get that. You don't have the gift of saying, let me just rub my eyes and blink again and it'll all go away. Like, let me all you're left with how could that have happened, or in what place and time, like where, when. So I really like that idea.
It raises much more interesting questions to me, be sure. And maybe not, they're more interesting, but also more questions. Because if you just look at it, what kind of questions can you really ask? Like, you saw it. All the details were there for you to look at.
Right.
How?
Yeah.
But it's just funner, I think, when you don't get to see all of that stuff.
Isn't normal, right? Like, if I have an apple and I shake it and it turns into a phone, you know that the apple's not real and the phone's not real. Maybe they are, but like, I don't have a method for that. But like,
how did we get on this subject anyway?
I don't know. We're talking about why we're talking about what you want the audience to take away from it, and
I think ambiguity is part of it too.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Mystery is very important. I think it's a primary experience for people to have, and it's one of those experiences that's a compass header too, especially for artists or people looking for some type of inspiration. And the important part is, like, when people have Google, or they think that there's an answer to everything. So I just, when you can have that rug get pulled out from underneath you, or the pieces just don't fit together like they used to. I think it's very, very important for people to have and for people to experience. It's part of being human.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost refreshing in the sense,
I mean, like, I've seen them do magic on chimpanzees and stuff, like with shuttle passes, and they react to it. But, I wonder how long they process that stuff or think about it as much as we do. Because I think, this is the spark of religion and dance and sculpture and philosophy.
Like wonder in general? Is that?
Yeah. Asking questions, having curiosity.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's huge.
Just to move in a little bit that direction, maybe of that. I know that you studied some very interesting things like ethnopharmacology, and I'd love to know how that had an impact on your magic and how that had an impact on what you do.
Well, my interest, I've been doing magic ever since I was a kid, and as a teenager, I started to become interested in what is the origin of magic among primitive people. And as I started to delve into the history behind this phenomenon, what I came to discover is whatever is at the beginning of magic dovetails into what the origin of religion is. So then what is the origin of religion among primitive people?
Right.
Well, I succumb to what's known as the Wasson theory, which is a man by the name of R. Gordon Wasson, who was a scholar at Harvard. He's a father of a science called ethnomycology. And Wasson showed that everywhere on the planet that the religions arose, the great religions, are in places where psychoactive plants were available in the environment to early man. And so where Darwin showed a natural mechanism for evolution, what Wasson showed was a natural mechanism for religious philosophy. And so,
wow.
You can look at it quite simply in that all religions arise from one phenomena, no matter if it's Christianity or whether it's Islam or whether it's early Buddhism. All religion arises out of shamanism.
Right,
so what is shamanism? Well, the scholar Messi Eliade said that it was the archaic techniques of ecstasy. And so what you find out is, I believe, where shamanism is vibrant and alive is in the places where, again, these plants are available and people are using them. And
Right.
we're the world of drug abuse, though. I've went to South America. I've went to see the way that these people live, and they don't have jails and drug addicts. That's
Right.
our problem of the modern world, and
Oh.
these things are surrounded by myth and religion. And so these people have had millennia to find out what the parameters of them are. Many of these things, they erupted onto our scene in the Western world in the 60s by these anthropologists and ethnographers coming back with this data.
Yeah.
And we didn't really know what to do with them. I mean, there was only really a small window of legality where people had a chance to experiment with these. It wasn't much more than 10
study
years.
them, right?
Yeah.
But,
Like not
and
only
the
like
thing is I was 20 years old at the time I was studying this stuff. And it was very much on the fringes of what was happening, and,
Right.
but almost all mainstream magazines now are having articles on this stuff. So, a very big one is people using right now compound psilocybin, which is found in what they call the magic mushrooms.
Yeah.
And it's very, very interesting. And, for instance, at Johns Hopkins, they've been able to get people being able to quit cigarettes with one dose of this molecule. Where if you're a specialist in the field of addiction, this is unheard of.
Yeah. And
So
with
I
mental
work
health
also,
too, right?
Well, and let me couple this before people think I'm advocating some dangerous path. That I did work for 13 years in the mental health field. And I worked with schizophrenics, and I worked for Utah State Mental Health. And, like in our world, schizophrenics, there's no way out. Where in the archaic world, if you were to start to exhibit some of these behaviors, they would know to take you somewhere, and that you would be treated very special. You would be the one to learn the myths and to tell the people when they were going to hunt, and so forth and so on, right? Where in our society, though, there's really no way out for these people.
Yeah.
In fact, we still don't really even know. It's very hard for us to talk about the alteration of consciousness when we really don't know what consciousness is in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's it's such a large, like field of study. There's so much history
the
and
field is ethnobotany, which ethno is culture and botany is plants, but the subset of this is entheobotany, which is God generated within.
Right.
Is en in theo God generated, right? And so these are the grab bags of the shamans and witch doctors around the world, and it's not a medical class of drugs. It's it can't.
But it's
not
not
as simple as that.
recreational either, right? Like
No,
there is
well,
a real.
these people
it is
do use them
technically.
recreationally. It's
Yes,
hard to
but
say.
people use pharmaceuticals recreationally too.
You'll read the anthropology journal, and they'll say that they use these only during religious ceremony. But what they don't often tell you is that there's often a religious ceremony every single day.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is so interesting, and particularly that you found it through your interest in
magic. And I think that when you study, and you look at the what it is that these compounds have done to people, they say the 7 or 10 or 12 or whatever, how many effects there are in magic. Again, all of these phenomena are what's inside of that space, that things are transforming from one thing to another, that time moves backwards, that mind reading is real.
Right.
I mean, all you have to do is go to any well-established university and go to their anthropology department, and you can find 1 million pages on this stuff.
Wow, that's super, super interesting, and definitely a great direction to think about magic in the lens of, even whether
a specific story that's us among magic may find interesting is there's a compound they've been talking about over the last few decades called DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and it's a natural neurotransmitter that you actually make in your body and release every day when you're in deep sleep dreaming.
Yeah, and it's not just in humans, right? It's in everything.
Well, that's what they say. They find it in plants and fish and other animals and grasses.
Yeah.
There is a paper by Alexander Shulgin, who is a toxicologist professor at Berkeley, called DMT is Everywhere. That's a very famous paper and interesting to read. And if you really want to read some interesting research, check out Alexander Shulgin. He was an old professor of mine and one of the most wonderful teachers that I ever had. A legendary man. Passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But what I was getting to with the DMT was, when the anthropologists and ethnographers first started studying this, the name that they gave to this compound was telepathine, because they believed that it facilitated telepathy.
Right.
And, but through the nomenclature of chemistry, what happens is whatever it was named first is the name that it gets stuck with. Mm-hmm. Somebody may isolate a compound later and give it another name, but then, researchers find out, it was actually this that was made 20 years before. And so you don't have anything new, which was happened with the case with this compound.
Right.
Wow. So much to take in.
Name, right? Telepathine.
Telepathine. I love it. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, like out of the show Fringe or so I want to change gears a little bit, although I think this is such a great piece for people to understand and take in, and just to see the overlap in terms of drugs and how they affect your brain, and as well as magic. And particularly, I love the idea of that you see the basic magic effects take place in recountings of what it's like to take these drugs. So I thought that was particularly cool. But I'd love to change gears a little bit and chat about some of your experience on Penn and Teller Fool Us, because you had a very interesting and unique experience where you were actually on the show during the pilot project, which is before it was a show. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm sure many of you have seen the second performance that I did with the 3 numbers that were pinned onto the back of my jacket, which was published in my first book. But it was a couple of years before that Penn and Teller was putting the show together. And of course it started in England, in London, right? But they had to do a pilot here in America to get the ball rolling, show what the show is about, so forth and so on. So they put a whole mock show together. The way that I came into it, I had no idea that this was even going on. But one afternoon, it's probably noon or 1 or so, and I get a call from Johnny, and he says, I need you to come down here and do some magic for Penn and Teller. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I don't really want to tell you about it right now, because I'm afraid if I tell you what's happening that you'll tell me no and that you don't want to do it. But I really need your help today. And I'm like, all right, I'm on my way. He's like, just bring a bunch of magic down for me. And I'm like, cool. So I get my briefcase, I go down there, and I see pretty much every magician in Las Vegas is there. And Johnny tells me, everybody needs to go up here and do something. We're trying to find somebody. We're doing this show, blah, 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 blah. He gives to me, all the details that we're all familiar with. And he says, nobody's going to fool these guys though, man. I need you to do it for me. And I actually did it awesome. 3 times in a row that day. And the effects that I did specifically, if people are interested, is the Matrix, Vernon's dice routine, and the sympathetic cards.
Wow. That's so cool to hear. What a beautiful, rich story for a show that everybody watches, to know some of the background as to and one could think, and I'm just theorizing, that had you not fooled them, there's a producer somewhere, that would have said, I don't think enough people will fool these two. You know what I mean?
Well, and here's the other thing is my book had just come out before that. And now, Johnny, I've been friends with him, and he's been working with them for the whole time I've known him. So basically they've known me for 15 years, and I've done magic for him so many times that it's like, how many people do you know for 15 years that haven't seen all the material that you do? But, there's a few things that I had. That was one of them. And, they supported me and they bought the book when it came out, but I seriously wondered if they even read it or not, or if it was just sitting on their shelf. So I'm like, well, shit, I guess we'll find out, huh? And I was up there and they started saying all that kind of stuff about it and saying, this is the only book we keep backstage. In fact, this is the one trick that we've been mulling over in our mind of how we can incorporate it into our own show, blah, blah, blah. It ended up being really wonderful. So, I figured I was in a win-win situation. I was like, either they read the book and they'll say something nice about it, or they haven't read the book,
didn't,
and this will fool anybody that has never read what the solution is.
Yeah. As someone who hasn't read what the solution is, I have no idea how that works.
It's wonderful.
So I want to go sort of in a little bit of a different direction as well. Now that I have seen you perform not only on TV, but I've seen sort of your full show, I was very enthralled by not only the manner in which you speak, but the words in which you choose. So I'd love to dive into what your process is in terms of scripting, or even just what sort of things you hold in high regard in terms of scripting, so that people
with
at home
scripting, for me, what it is I look at the routine and I try to just think of everything that it's about, and I literally throw as much as I can at the barn wall, but I know that in the end, probably 85% or more of that is going to be cut away.
Right.
So, and another thing that I do is I keep all of my drafts of my scripts in my email. And so, I don't want to necessarily carry a notepad around with me everywhere, but sometimes I have a little inspiration for a line or a twist to say at a certain moment. And I'm like, oh my God, that'll be really good right there. And so I can get into my email there and add that into the script, and keep that stuff fresh and updated. And I don't have a bunch of copies of it where I'm always having to rewrite it it in another notebook again.
Right.
Wow, that's great. Go ahead.
Those are helpful to me too, oftentimes before my show starts. So I can look at my opening script and I can, okay, good, or I can look over a handful of jokes and be like, maybe some point in the, I'll probably not use that stuff, but it just puts me in the right frame of mind. And I know that I have just staying fresh with something to fall back on, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like, I can totally relate to that. It took me a while to start scripting, and I would always be so nervous when I walked out on stage. And sometimes I would, have a brain fart and blank out and not really know where to go with my next step. And then it's not like I was following the script word for word, but just being able to read it one more time right before I walk on stage gave me this confidence that I know what I'm doing,
Right. Yeah. And I always start with the same opening lines too. And again, words in here and there, nothing's ever set in concrete, but I pretty much know where the map is going to lead.
Yeah, that's sort of, I can't remember. We've done so many interviews this week, but that is what we said was you want to have the freedom to paint whatever you want, but you need a canvas to do it on.
Yeah.
Was the way we phrased it. So there's something to be said for being natural and fluid and in the moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean improvised, right?
Well, you want it to look like it's improvised, and I think there's some fun lines you can say, sometimes I'm going to do that matrix in my show, and the way that I'll open it up with, and the truth of the matter is nobody ever said anything to me about it, but I'll tell the audience, this was something I wasn't planning on doing, but somebody approached me earlier on special request. And so, take a little detour here, and I thought I'd do this for you. And it allows me to, again, tell this little story about Penn and Teller if it's something that I decide to put in there or not. Again, I don't have to add that story, but sometimes you're in the right crowd or it's pretty interesting,
Sometimes
or
you want to, yeah.
Sometimes people do ask me once in a while earlier, what about Penn and Teller? And I'll be like, I'll tell a story in the show later.
Right. Yeah.
And having that email full of ideas, and also, throwing everything down there when you look at an effect allows you to have a large grab bag. Again, whether or not you choose to use them, you have this large set of resources with you. If, someone asks you a question before the show or something and you're like, oh, I'll talk about that. And then all you have to do is pull in one of those lines that relates to this topic heavily. And it might just be one line or one sentence that you can throw in as a nod
Right,
to
right.
an earlier conversation.
Yep.
I love that. That's really interesting. So we spoke about Penn and Teller. I wanted to dive a little bit and talk about sort of your ideal performance situation. I know that you perform on stage, you perform close up, and you do stuff
It
in
matters
like a
what kind of
table.
magic I'm doing. I mean, in close up specifically, I really want people close up. I'd like to take a room that holds 50 and put 80 in there.
Right.
And just have them packed around. For parlor, I like again, people close on the side of me, at least as ambassadors to the audience, and maybe a little horse-shaped area in front where I can go and present a little bit more out into the audience in front of. And usually if I can set something up in a parlor thing like that, what I like to do is not have so much rows of chairs, because then it starts feeling very formal, but more like a living room setup, So I like couches and chairs and tables and stuff where, just personally for me, I mean, of course, not often that's ideally going to happen, but if I had to choose, that's what I would choose. And then, for when it comes to the stage stuff, there's not that much magic that I want to try to project out from that far. So I'm probably going to go more toward the mentalism. To me, the interest in magic for me is in the close up. I think, for magic to really be powerful to me and to be effective, there's a sense of proximity to it.
Of course, distance is one of the factors that is, things are more impressive in your hands than they are as someone else's hands, as they are 10 steps away, as they are on a
distance
TV.
leads enchantment to the eye.
Yeah.
And I always think of something that another friend once told me: anybody could be good from 30 feet, right?
I love that. You seem to have a pretty good understanding of how you want to, open your show, how you want to close your show, and the reasons for what you choose where. Do you have any advice for someone who knows a ton of magic but has no idea how to cohesively put their tricks together?
God, that's one of the roughest and the toughest questions of all. And, part of with my show, what I like to do now, again, this doesn't lend itself to anything, but a few of the links in the show that's nice, for instance, is the props that end one effect begin the next. Right. So I may do McDonald aces and I end with the guy taking the 4 aces out of his pocket. And now, sometimes I'm afforded a deck switch at this moment, because I'll get rid of that deck and I introduce the 4 coins, and I use those 4 aces, and now I introduce the deck again, but I'm ready to go with something else or in a different direction with it. And the truth of the matter is I probably won't come back to that for 3 or 4 or 5 tricks, but I'll be able to reference it later, right? Another thing is 99% of the time that I start out with any type of card magic, I'll choose a brainwave or Chicago opener type effect, because it's a effect that's about the people's decisions and not about the cards. Like, for the effect to take place, nothing needs to be examined. But at the end of that effect, now I can hand those cards to somebody and say, please, I know what you're thinking. There must be something funny with these. Right, but there's not. They're just the way they come from the store, and you're a gambling man, so please check them front and back. Right now, as soon as another thing that'll often happen is I'll have a partial stack that I have in this pack, which can allow me to go in one direction if I want to. Of course, if it gets destroyed, I'm prepared to go in another direction. But what will happen is if I say these words to the gentleman next to me and hand them off to him, and the minute that he takes them, I'll switch gears now toward the audience, and I'll say, and while he's examining those, let me show the rest of you something, the first magic trick I ever learned, or whatever it is. And I start to engage people and pulling away from him. And so I know what he wants to do is just set those cards down so he can watch and listen to what I have to say to everybody else too. Right now, again, it's not 100% effective, but it's at least 95% effective.
Yeah.
And again, now here's one thing: is once I have control of that small stack, now I can afford for him to shuffle.
Right.
And
Right,
then even
exactly.
further later on down the road, I'll reference that even further to clinch it, right? So now when after the deck switch is done, I can look back and say, and did you examine these? I asked you front and back, right? And then hold on, did you mix these? Because I had you,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Okay.
You can pull back on that.
I think it's really one of the most powerful techniques in all of magic, and it's something that's not written about enough. Or I'm sure that we all use it, and it's something that we intuit. But I still think more to it in our future, and it's what it is not the sleights or the choice of effects, but the rearranging of the past.
Right.
And when you do that,
Yeah.
it's very, very hard for somebody, I mean, like this, if you took these two swallows, you examine these, you shuffle these, and now something like out of this world happens, it's going to be very, very hard to backtrack, right?
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. I really like the when we ask that question quite often to people who we think are capable of answering it, and that was a very, concise way. Those are actually actionable things you can take. Look at the material and look at what flows into,
Yeah, I
and
love
one
that.
thing is find, know what is stronger than the next. You always want to build that impossibility. And the other thing is, this is just a personal thing of me, is like I don't do two type of effects in a row ever. So I wouldn't do a coin effect and then another coin effect. So like if I do a card effect, then the next one is going to be another type of effect. And now I can come back to the cards if I want to. Although when I put my show together, there's maybe 1, 2, or 3 at the most card effects that I'll do in an hour-long show.
Right. I love the idea of separating those things, because you want to make sure that they don't blend in the minds of spectators, and that each thing is sort of taken as an
to talk about another symmetry break among all of this is, although I talk about the mixture of the magic and the mentalism, and Jonah, you can vouch for some of this, even the magic that I'm doing in the beginning is very much with a mental orientation to it.
Absolutely.
It's not strictly going in that direction. There's still fun visual stuff. But when I finally get to the mentalism, I say, what we're about to do is different. And it doesn't have anything to do with the cards or the coins or any of these kind of props that we've been having fun with earlier. The last half of this show is about one mind and another mind coming together in unison. And if you really wanted to mess me up, you could, right? You'll see how easy it would be, but I hope that you don't. Right. So although I've been challenging in the beginning, I really want to endear people now, not that I did it before, but like I want to let my guard down. I want to let my shield down now, because, and this brings back another point that we were talking about earlier. I don't mean to be super pretentious or anything, but it's something that's a compass heading for me is, they say artists are the antenna of culture. And part of what I see that's going on in society right now is a breakdown of communication. So I think it's very inspiring to groups of people when they can see effective demonstrations of telepathy, where signals are being sent from one to another, and there's no loss in the quality, right?
Right.
It gives us something to strive for. If we don't have the model for it, it can't happen, right? And another thing that I believe is, we've gotten arguments in the past before, I have with Johnny, and about the skepticism and the believability of these things, and one time when in a heated argument, John asked me, do you believe that telepathy is real then? And my answer was, and he softened up, and he even uses it sometimes now, which I'm fond of, but I believe that technology is pushing us in that direction. So it's not whether I believe it or not. It's that I believe that we are being pushed in that direction. And I think that we need to be pushed in that direction.
I love that, because like when I was a kid, I imagined, like, just did my darndest to imagine what it would be like to experience virtual reality. And now I'm 22 and I've experienced it.
Right.
Like I've entered into another
You
world.
can't even imagine what it's like, though. Like, unless you've had a little taste of that, like people, they have no idea what the future is going to be like at all.
Exactly.
I mean, and when I look at that stuff, I feel like it's barely like the fish that first put its fin out onto land. Like, these are just the baby steps. And I don't know what 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 years of technological advancement will do to these things. And anybody that tells me anything that's concrete, I'd be very, very weary of them. You know, like you can imagine faster cars and louder speakers and, bigger, whatever it is, but there's things on the horizon you can't imagine.
Yeah, we don't know what it's like to merge our consciousness with a computer. You can't picture that.
No, it brings up another one of my favorite sayings. I mean, I love to be a skeptic, but I'm not a simply this or merely that guy either. I realize that we're on a rock that's in a certain distance from a nuclear reactor floating through space. Like, what could be more unlikely?
Exactly.
But and it's always been one that ever since I was a teenager I've loved, and it's from a British etymologist, J.B.S. Helbane, and he wrote, "The universe is not only stranger than you suppose, it's stranger than you can suppose."
And you say that in your show, and I haven't forgot it since you said it.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that piece.
Or
it's stranger than you can suppose.
Another one of my teachers was the late Terence McKenna, and one he would always tell us students is, "The bigger you build the bonfire of understanding, the more darkness you will reveal to your startled eye."
Oh, that's great as well. And I love this love for mystery and for the love of not knowing. And, that's something that, as magicians, we have to enjoy more of.
Well, and it comes from a different line of schooling, and it's, bringing up John again and in the different ways that people were taught. For instance, when he went to school as a kid at that time, they would show him a picture of an atom and say, "This is what it looks like." Right. But when I went to school, they said, "This is the model of an atom. And next year we'll have a better model. And a year after that, we'll have an even better model." So it's not like you get the truth and you wrestle it down in the corner. You just approach it, but it's always ahead of you.
As best as you can. Yeah, I love that. We have, now that we're getting towards the end of the episode, we have a few different wrap-up questions to sort of put a cap on the episode. And let's start with one of them. So the first one is sort of a magic PSA. So you've basically the opportunity to tell all the magicians of the world something. You can tell them what to start doing, what to stop doing, anything that all the magicians of the world need to know. So what is that thing?
Damn, I wished I had something really clever to say right now. I just keep going. Use the best. You have never been needed more than you've been needed now. And at no time has permission been so much granted. And also at no time has science or philosophy offered you so many avenues for great lines,
inspiration.
Right? Go and read a book on where physics are nowadays. You couldn't ask for anything to be more trippy. And you thought that you had some weird magic ideas. I promise you, these guys in the white ivory towers are way more far out than you imagined.
Yeah. I love that.
That's incredible.
That's such a great direction to send people in.
And this is sort of similar to the PSA, but it's not really just a statement. It's a question. We call it the question of the week. And it can either be for you to sort of poll our audience and learn what they think about a topic, or if it's an introspective question, you want them to ask themselves. But other than that, just you have the ears of our audience. What do you want to ask them?
I think that we need to leave trivial magic behind. I believe that there is such richness for us to grab onto. I just see so much stuff that literally a lot of the magic that I see has very, very little mystery in it. I mean, when I look at some of the posters of some of these magicians, I imagine that something grand is going to unfold for me. And oftentimes I'm so disappointed, honestly. But other times I'm greatly, greatly inspired, just A couple of weeks ago, I saw the Evansons perform again, which just always completely blow my mind.
Incredible.
Right?
I have, they're one of the few times in, my life as a magician that, like, no matter how many times I watch them perform, it feels like real magic every time.
Another one of my very favorites I'd love to brag about is Ross Johnson. I know a lot of people, oftentimes I bring up his name and they don't know who he is. And Ross has honestly given the strongest performance of magic that I've ever seen in my life. I'll always be grateful to him for that, besides his warm friendship and his sharing of the knowledge that he's shared with me.
It's so great to have people like that in your magic. Another question that we've recently brought back is, what is something in your in the 2018-2019 world of magic that you like, and something in the 2018-2019 world of magic that you dislike?
Oof. God, there's been a lot of books that I've been picking up lately that I've been reading a lot of really fun stuff out of. I literally bought about over $1,000 worth of magic books in the last week. And so I've been doing nothing but sitting here reading. And to me, really what I'm focused on now is for the last couple of months, I've been focused on the blindfold act. And I haven't performed it for people or anything, but I've just been reading every possible aspect, every single thing that I can find out about it. And I don't know if it's something that I'll end up doing, but it's something that I've enjoyed watching, and it's a new avenue of magic that I haven't walked down that I want to start to play with more.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's part of my road that I'm on right now. The other things is I'm going to be out there with Jonah again in literally about 1 month. So I think I have 4 cities in Canada that I'm going to: Toronto, Montreal, somewhere, right? And this summer in June, I'm going to Italy. And what I'm hoping to do is branch this out into being able to go to a few other places while I'm over on that side of the pond. So if you're listening and you'd like me to come and lecture, get a hold of me soon, because I'm going that way. And
awesome.
Yeah, I don't know what else. Anything else you guys have?
Yeah, with few more final wrap up questions.
I'm ready.
So one of the things we like to do is sort of go around one at a time and say our favorite part, something that we'd like to highlight. Usually me and Jonah start, and then we ask our guest. So for me, I was really, I don't talk about it a lot with a lot of magicians, but when you were speaking about different psychoactive substances and the role they play in culture, not necessarily just the effects that they have on the human brain and how impactful they can be, it was really, I don't want to say eye-opening, but intriguing. I've done a fair bit of research myself into the pharmacology of certain things, because of, I think what magic does is alter perceptions for a moment, which is what the same thing that these substances do, right? So I don't know. I'm very interested in talking a little bit more about that with you in the future and doing some more research myself. Jonah, what about you? What was your favorite part?
I loved a lot of the information about some of these lines that you've put together in your show, and more importantly, these lines that you have to talk about the impossibility of the world around us, and to talk about, just a simple sentence like talking about looking at what physicists are doing, or a sentence like the world is stranger than you can suppose. These are things that help put into perspective what it is that we do, and help put in perspective the importance of the mystery. So I really got a lot out of hearing just those short sentences. Paul, a lot of people have been listening to this for at least an hour now. What is one major take home from the episode that you think people should take with them?
I just was so happy that you guys are out there supporting magic and spreading magic and creating a community and bringing us together and making me a part of it. And I hope that some of the listeners out there will reach out to me. I feel, always when I do these things, if you make a new friend in whatever it is, then it ends up becoming a success, right? And I already made one new friend here with Tyler, so hey, I'm winning.
I love that. We have two more sections. The first is the endless chain of magicians. So in order to get this podcast to continue on for eternity, we have each person on an episode recommend somebody else who should be on the episode, with the only caveat, you have to be able to put us in contact. So who do you think we absolutely must have on this podcast?
Can I say more than one name?
Absolutely,
please.
So,
but again, you have to be able to put us in
email or
contact.
phone number.
There's so many talented guys out there that I really like that hope their voice gets heard more. One is Mike Pisciata, who of course won Magician of the Year for the last 2 years from the Academy of Magical Arts. I just think he's such a wonderful magician, and not only that, I just think he's just a great person. And some of the younger guys that I've been into is Ed Kwan's been here. He just moved here to Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and he's been spending about every night here. And we've been up till 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning on magic every night. And
that's awesome. That's amazing.
Alex Boyce has been here, another young magician who's very, very talented, who I really, really like a lot and want to see have more success. And of course, there's always the people that are around here in Vegas that I'm sure some of you don't know about. One's, my very, very good friend who lives just down the street is Jeff Korn. And he's a magician that many of you probably don't know about, but he's probably one of the most working magicians that nobody knows about. He's actually the house magician out at the Grand Canyon, and he's been there for a number of years. And another young guy that hangs around who really is inspiring, and it's a lot of his own techniques and a lot of fun and everybody's going to see more of him because he just I don't want to say too much, but you're going to see him on something that we've been talking about, but is Alex Geyser.
Nice
And
awesome.
These are a handful of guys that I can easily put you guys in touch with, and I'm sure they'd love to come on here and rap with you also.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
That's very exciting.
And finally, the last segment is your plugs. Is there anything that you think our audience should go check out, whether it's something you're releasing, a show you're doing?
I have my book out there that came out less than a year ago, and I probably literally have about 6 copies here of it left. So if anybody wants one, now's the time to get one.
Let's get those gone. Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure that by the time this podcast comes out, every single one of them are gone.
Oh, you guys are the best.
Yeah.
Hey, Jonah, I'll look forward to seeing you very, very soon, my dear friend. Tyler, I don't know if you'll be. Are you up there in Canada also?
Yeah.
We're in the same room.
Oh, awesome. Well, maybe I'll get a chance to shake your hand and we'll have a drink or something.
Amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
And with that, Paul, thank you so much for coming to join us on this episode. Totally action packed. And of course, thank you everybody at home who tuned in and learned a little bit about magic and really how amazing the world is around us. Your ears mean the world to us. So thank you guys so much. And thank you, Paul, for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Well, holy crap. I hope you liked that episode. I know I did, and I know that I learned a few things, and especially after, Paul came and stayed at my house for a few days after we recorded this episode, and man, I learned a ton more from the guy. So he's a real thinker. I highly recommend looking him up on the online world, and while you're online, go ahead and grab yourself one of the 100 t-shirts. If there are any left at this point, maybe there's 1 or 2 or none, but if there aren't any left, there's only 100 for Discourse in Magic fans, and I want you to have it so you can brag and wear it to magic conventions and things like that. So thank you so much. Thanks for buying the shirt. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and I'll see you next Thursday. What up?